Okay, hello and welcome back to the next mix breakdown of Ethanol Blend's The Blend Part 2 album. Hope that you enjoyed the last episode. I've tried a bit harder to make sure that my mic is not clipping as much and sounds a bit clearer. I'm also going to go into probably not a huge amount of detail of covering all the same bits and pieces as last episode. So if you're interested in a few bits and pieces, like if you see some different plugins and bits and pieces and you don't see me talk about them too much, then make sure you check out the previous ep. So first thing that I'm going to cover off is I'm going to show you guys the the edit window here. Okay, we're going to have a look at the edit window, and you can see that we have quite a few layers that come and go over time. Let me zoom out a bit here. So you can see we have quite a few layers that come in and out over time, and that really helps build dynamics in the song. I've also opened up all of the different automations that I've put in for panning. So you can see here I've got the acoustic guitar that starts nice and centered, and then you'll hear it shift off to the side. Right? So it doesn't fully shift off to the side, not all the way left, about 70%. And then you can also see here this guitar we have starting off the other side. That's 72% off to the right, and then later on it's nice and centered. Here we have this clean ambient guitar, which starts off centered and then shifts off from one side to the other. Down here we have some single notes. Might have to try and ask Jack and remember what pedal he was using for that one, because I can't remember, but it sounds pretty rad. Those high up harmonics. Got a feeling, like, because it's definitely got a bit of a delay on it, of like a bit of a pre-delay on what sounds like a harmonized reverb. So yeah, I'll have to ask him because I can't remember. Here we have our tambourine track. Nice bit of effects on that one. Starts off on the right hand side and then becomes centered for the ending. You'll notice a lot of the panning ends up going to centered, and we lean more into the stereo effects as the song progresses, more into the delays, reverbs, those sorts of things. So, quick overlook of our drums. We have our standard kick, snare, and overheads that we had in the previous track for Underwater. But you'll notice an extra little track here called Floor Tom. That one I went through and trimmed all around wherever it wasn't being played, so it just comes in and out so that there's not, so it reduces the risk of phase issues. Just reduces the risk of phase issues and additional spillage that we don't need, because we were recording this with some other instruments in the space and the scratch vocals and stuff, so the more you can reduce the spill, the better. Can see here we also have our overheads, which are nice and dynamic, and this one, because it was more of a chilled song, less rocky, you'll notice the waveforms are a lot more dynamic. So I didn't put this through the external compressor before going in here because I wanted the dynamics to naturally ebb and flow a bit more. So I just did digital plugins for digital effects for those tracks, for our kicks and our snares and our hi-hats for those bits and pieces. So here we have our kick EQ. So one of my favorite techniques, which I still use quite a bit of the time when I need to, I got from Mark Mozart, who has a whole mixing book, like an ebook, which I read front to back, and provides a lot of handy little tidbits and techniques and bits and pieces. So here we have our kick EQ, where we are boosting our fundamental. You'll notice it's pretty much around 80 hertz. And then we're dipping some of those low mid harmonics around our second, third order harmonics, and then adding a little bit of air and a little bit of click. So let's have a quick listen to this. So now I'll get rid of, there we go. So no EQ, sounds so flat. Really adds a nice punch. Running it through the 1176. There are attack and release settings there, only a ratio of 4. You'll notice here as well, same on the kick EQ, on the EQ plugin, I saved this preset, sloth kick and sloth kick for the compressor settings. Made it a lot easier to get a consistent tonality across the album by starting off with matching settings and then just adjusting if I needed to. Then of course the NLS channel running across things, just adding a little bit of saturation. As we go along here as well, just quickly address this one, you'll notice that it goes up in order. So we go from mic 01 to mic 02 to mic 03. All of these are under the presets, and you can nab the different colors of the board inputs. So I tried my best to make everything a little bit more unique regarding character, and that NLS channel definitely helps with that. Let's have a look at our snare settings. I'm going to go to the faster section so that we have a few more snare hits. Have our first EQ, sloth snare 1, second EQ, sloth snare 2, then a 1A, sloth snare 3, and a 76. Really spanking that. So let's hear it without any of those enabled. First EQ, and you can hear a dramatic difference there already. Let me just play them back to back again. Drop the EQ out. Bring that first EQ in. Second EQ. Third EQ. And then compressor. There you go, remember, once again you might feel that that's a bit too much high end, but it's being blended in with those overheads. So let's have a quick look at our floor tom before we get to the overheads. We have it panned over slightly left on 43. The reason for that, or the way that I was able to decide where to place any tom when I record live drums, is I listen to the overhead placement and just have it on loop, because generally speaking I have my overheads very wide. You know, I feel that, you know, you can narrow them back a little bit, but then it just depends on how much of a stereo spread you want across the kit, really. So in this case, overheads far left and far right, because I want that nice lush stereo spread. What I did was then, pretty much just played the overheads on loop and played the floor tom afterwards, like A-Bing them, and then sort of kept panning until it felt about right, so that it would match up phase-wise and such with the overheads as well, and sort of help reinforce it. And then I've got the EQ on here. You'll notice similar low-end shape to the kick. Let's drop it out. Very hollow. I'll bring it back in. Right, similar EQ concept to the kick drum. All right. Here on the overheads, we have J37. And even in those, if you're listening real careful, you can hear the scratch vocal of Jack singing in the background there. Right? So, that's the nature of recording, especially when you're just in a spare bedroom. This was all just recorded in a spare bedroom. It's the nature of when you have multiple instruments all in the same space. You try and minimize the spillage as much as you can. The way that we recorded this was that the drums were live, and of course the vocals were live, because you can't really silence a vocal when you're in a live environment. And so that everyone could hear each other, everyone was running into the interface. Now you'll see the name of the interface here. I was running a PreSonus Fire Studio project, and that was essentially just running 8 mic inputs. So, well, it was XLR or TRS inputs, so guitar or microphone. And so the drums were all multi-tracked in, and I didn't know all of the drum parts, so you only see the few tracks here of kick, snare, floor tom, then overhead, left and right on the one track. But I was running a full mic kit setup, so a lot of the tracks were taken up with that. Then I had bass and guitar plugged directly into the interface, along with the vocal mic. So everyone could just play along to each other. There were no click tracks or anything. It was just play it a couple of times until we were happy with the drum take, knowing that we were able to re-record guitar, vocals and bass again afterwards. So anyway, on our overhead track, we have our J37. We have this EQ dipping all of our low end, and our Pultec style EQ, once again saved, Sloth OHS, Sloth overheads, really pumping up the air. So let's have a listen without them, and then I'll bring them in one by one. Already hear that difference? With just the tape saturation adding that bit of crunch, bit of a boost. Then that second EQ. And then now air. The Pultec style EQs are fantastic for pumping up that high end. You do need to be careful though, because it's a passive style EQ like the hardware is, right? and it's tube driven, so you get a nice bit of warmth and adds a nice bit of flavor. But you also need to be careful because it is easy to dial in way too much of anything, whether it's high end or low end. So it's always good to make sure you A/B it, and then even take a bit of a break, come back and double check. So then we have our standard 3A hard drum group for our drums. Now let's have a look at our acoustic guitar track here. This guitar plays through the entire track. As you can see here, plays through the entire track, this blue one here. Sorry, this purple track here. So we have the following plugins. Dipping the low end, giving it a bit of high end and high mids. Then our next one, adding a bit of a different curve to dip some of that high end. I've got a feeling that there was an issue with it jumping out way too far, and get rid of some of that pick attack. And then just a dialed in compressor to help smooth out the dynamics and reduce some of the attack. Let's have a look at our next track here. Plays through a few parts. So this is Macca's lead trem guitar. Just a little bit of EQ on this one without it. And I'll bring it in. Dipping a few areas to make room for some other instruments, making it a bit more mid-focused around the 500 1K mark, but not by much. It's not dramatic, just dipping a couple of dBs here and there. Panned off to the left at 56, so about halfway panned off to the left. Stays there the whole time. Let's have a look at what we have next. Now we have this guitar track. Now you'll hear that one's a bit crunchy. I believe it was recorded a bit crunchy even. I think that the mic input might have been a little bit hot when we tracked that one. I added a little bit of brightness. And you'll notice it's quite low in the mix here at -7.7. So it's not really a standout track. Let me play the whole mix and then isolate just that guitar. Let's see how much it stands out. Then I'll even mute it and see how much of a difference that makes. So it definitely helps fill bits and pieces out. Very subtle, which is good. Because yeah, I've got a feeling it was recorded a little bit hot. That one there, which happens. That happens sometimes. But if it's a good take, and you don't notice that it's gonna jump out until partway through and you're not running a compressor in front of anything, then, sometimes you just have to run with it and just try and recover what you can afterwards. And who knows, if it's not damaging anything, if it's not killing anything, then it's okay. Okay, here we have our next guitar part. This one starts over on the side. Mostly right. and then it centers up partway through the song, nice and lush. Not much effect on that one, just the bit of channel saturation, just that desk emulation. Here we have this guitar, the ambient guitar overdrive wide. Now you're probably hearing a bit of a phasing effect there. First I'm hitting it with a compressor. It gives it a bit of drive and helps tame it. Turns it into more of a drone. It really helps level everything out. But it's this plugin here which is creating the width and the extra bit of drive. So this is the Waves Real ADT. So the artificial double tracker or automatic double tracker, based off of a technique that the Beatles used to use with the vari-speed of one tape machine taking the output of a vocal take, running it through a second tape machine, changing the speed of it, and then sending it back into the first one as an overdub. This is the expanded version of it, where we actually have the source guitar and two extra double tracks. So I've got a bit of drive push up on each of them, extra bit of saturation, then hard left, hard right, and center. So let's have a bit of a listen to what the guitar was like without the double tracks. I'll bring in one of them. And now the other one. So it really helps achieve that stereo spread, the real lush width that we all know from Ethanol Blend and love. Now we have this guitar carrying that little bit of a melody. Let's hear it in context. So you'll notice that starts over on the left, hand at 60, it's about to jump over to the right, at 60. So just a bit of EQ on that guitar to dip some of the low end. Let's hear it with and without. So without it, and then with it. It's quite funny, sometimes when you want to make something a bit brighter or push the mids a little bit, it makes more sense to carve out some of the other frequencies instead. Because you'll notice that it doesn't really sound like I'm dipping the lows, it sounds like it gets brighter. Right? But I'm not adding any EQ here. I'm not pumping up any frequencies. I'm just getting rid of some of the low ones that I didn't want. Okay. There are so many guitar tracks. Okay. Here we have our clean chorus guitar. Just centered, bit of EQ on there. Similar to the other one actually, just dipping that low end. Then we have another instance of ADT on a guitar overdrive track. Making it nice and wide. Single notes. Now I've got some real surgical EQ going on here. Let's have a listen to it with and without. So let me take that EQ off. button on. And you can hear there's a bit of a few abrasive frequencies in there. Then we got the warm blanket. Now this one I remember because this became a bit of a thing. Whenever there was a nice slow track, we had to create the warm blanket guitar. Without the EQ. Bring the EQ back in. Lowering the low mids, the very bottom end, and giving it a bit more air up the top. Then we got a stereo version of the warm blanket, which I believe the warm blanket shimmer. This is the same track, I just duplicated it and then put the ADT on there to add some extra stereo spread. An extra bit of drive as well. Now onto our bass guitar. This was recorded through an amp, so already dialed in a nice tone. Just a bit of EQing to make it fit in the song without the EQ. Very subtle. Then our tambourine track, which has some EQ on it to really just make it mostly high end, and then some nice delay and reverb. I believe this was a guesstimation of the I think I used the tap tempo function on the delay to work out the speed that the delay needed to be at, to be able to get a nice bit of slap back in time with everything else. Then we also have, this is just the one of the stock reverb plugins. Just dialed in a little bit, so the reverb time is actually quite huge, along with the room size. 4.2 seconds of reverb time and 80% room size. Now I've just got the mix only at 39%. So without any of that, that's what our tambourine sounds like. Very anticlimactic, isn't it? Then with our EQ and delay, so you can hear all those taps. Then with the reverb, you sort of get the taps and then the rest of the, you get the first couple and then the rest sort of wash away. Adds a nice ambiance. Our vocals, these ones I all ran through the tube preamp. And only time will tell. Using the sibilance plugin, nice and simple, and a bit of extra saturation from the J37 set on the male vocal warmth. But of course, thing that I always do is dial the noise level all the way to 0, because nothing annoys me more than the idea of having additional hiss from a tape machine emulation that doesn't need to be hissing. So all of those, you'll notice, don't even have a compressor on them. Right? There's no volume automation on any of these either, I don't believe. Right? The idea behind that was, like everything else in this song, it's delicate, right? Nice and spacious. Jack's vocals were dynamic enough that they still stood out where they needed to in the verses. He double tracked them as well. I'll go over that in a second. But you'll notice, let me jump to our edit window, we have our main vocal track here in the red, right? And that continues through the whole lot, verses, choruses. And then we have two different double tracks. We have our, what looks to be our louder section, doubled just as loud as the original take. And then we have our another vocal track down here, which is doubled the more quiet sections. So let's have a listen to those. First, our original vocal.
And only time will tell.
Our second.
And only time will tell.
And then this one, which will be a different chunk because it's not the chorus.
And I can't help but feel bizarre.
So that's a lower harmony take. And all of these ascending, of course, like everything else you'll be able to see. Same trick as the previous mix, all sending to that master reverb channel, except the reverb's cranked up a little bit more on the master fader here. And then we also have our vocal compressor, so there's no separate vocal reverb for this one. Let's have a bit of a listen.
And I can't help but feel bizarre. And only time will tell. And life is full of surprises. And
You can see how the dynamics introducing and reducing different instruments makes everything ebb and flow more naturally. Now we have other bits and pieces going on here, just the vocal compressor as well. So we'll have a listen to our vocals with and without the compressor track. So without it.
And I
And with it.
And I can feel one coming real soon.
Okay, that about covers everything in this track, I believe. It's just been really fun revisiting these actually, and listening back and having a look at all of the different production decisions and bits and pieces that I made. I absolutely do not regret any of the changes that I made because, I'm very committal to the way that I produce and mix and such. It's always handy to look back and reflect and learn, but you can't regret any of the decisions that you made. There is one thing that surprised me, because I use it so much now, is the big lack of compression across most of the instruments here, because that's something that I use a lot of now. This L1 is doing absolutely nothing on the master bus. Can't even remember why I have it there. I'm fairly sure I took it off when I was doing the final bounce out, and then of course the NLS non-linear summer bus plug-in. Yeah, there we go. All right, thank you very much for joining me on this one, and I will see you guys in the next video.